Do you remember the things everyone bought in the 1980s? The ones that filled every cart, closet, and shelf? These everyday products shaped our routines, our style, and even our friendships. So ordinary then, but unforgettable now. Looking back, do you wonder what they really say about us? Scratch-off lottery tickets were a simple thrill that just about everyone in the 1980s tried at least once. The bright colors and bold designs called out from behind counters at gas stations and convenience stores, making it almost impossible to resist the temptation of buying just one. They were cheap, usually only $1 or less, and gave you a chance, however slim, at instant riches. Families would grab a couple of these tickets while filling up on gas or picking up milk, and kids always begged to help scratch away the silvery film. That quick rush of uncovering numbers or symbols made them feel like tiny treasure maps, where the prize could change your entire day. Parents would even hand a coin to their kids just to let them join the fun, turning a small gamble into a shared memory. Even if you lost, there was still that adrenaline rush, the hope that the next one might be the big winner. For a country riding on waves of consumer confidence and pop culture optimism, scratch-offs perfectly fit the mood of the time. They were flashy, quick, and addictive, and in a decade obsessed with bigger and better, they made gambling seem accessible to everyone. By the end of the 1980s, scratch-off tickets had become a fixture of everyday life, stuffed into stockings at Christmas, tucked into birthday cards, and handed out at office parties as fun little gifts. Winning or losing did not matter. It was all about the thrill. Bonkers candy was the kind of treat that seemed almost too silly to be real, yet every kid in the 1980s had a wrapper stuffed in their pocket at some point. The commercials were zany and over the top, showing giant pieces of fruit falling from the sky when someone bit into the candy. The chewy squares came in flavors like grape and strawberry, each with a gooey, fruity center that made them stand out from other sweets of the time. It was not just candy, it was entertainment, with commercials kids could not stop quoting and flavors that felt larger than life. Parents bought them during grocery trips, tossing a pack or two into the cart because they were cheap enough to say yes to without much thought. Kids traded them on school playgrounds, unwrapping them slowly and savoring that burst of sweetness. Bonkers fit perfectly into the 1980s candy landscape alongside other experimental and colorful treats that pushed the boundaries of what snacks could be. The texture was half the fun. Chewy on the outside, soft and gooey in the middle, a double-layered experience that felt like two candies in one. Even if the hype eventually faded, the memory of those wacky commercials and the rush of biting into a piece of Bonkers stuck with an entire generation. The candy aisle was crowded, but Bonkers made its mark, and for a while, it felt like everyone was hooked on that gooey, fruity surprise. The Sears Wish Book catalog was the definition of excitement for families in the 1980s. This massive book arrived in the mail each year and quickly became a centerpiece of holiday season planning. Kids would flip through the toy section, circling action figures, dolls, and video game systems, while parents studied the pages for clothes, appliances, and home decor. It was more than just shopping. It was daydreaming on paper, with every page offering a window into what your life could look like. The catalog had everything, from backyard swing sets to the latest stereo systems, making it feel like the entire world of consumer goods was at your fingertips. Families often sat together on the couch, passing the book around and making wish lists, even if they knew not everything was possible. The Sears Wish Book turned the act of browsing into a ritual, a shared experience that bonded households through imagination and hope. For kids, the toy section was like pure magic, seeing things they had only glimpsed in commercials suddenly laid out in glossy detail. For adults, it was both practical and aspirational, a way to shop without leaving the house while dreaming about upgrading to the latest modern conveniences. In an era before online shopping, this catalog was as close as you could get to having an entire store in your living room. The Sears Wish Book was not just a catalog, it was a tradition, a holiday memory, and a cultural icon of 1980s consumer life. Air mousse was everywhere in the 1980s, and it seemed like no bathroom counter was complete without at least one tall, foamy can. Mousse gave you volume, height, and control, which meant it was the secret weapon behind the sky-high bangs, curls, and perms that defined the decade. Teenagers sprayed it liberally before school, trying to outdo each other with bigger hair, while adults relied on it for professional styles that stayed in place through long days. The best part was watching the foam expand in your hand, a light and airy texture that felt futuristic compared to stiff gels or sticky sprays. Applying it became part of the morning routine, almost like brushing your teeth, and entire bottles disappeared in record time. Hairdressers swore by it, using mousse to craft gravity-defying looks that seemed almost impossible to achieve without it. The smell of mousse lingered in locker rooms, bedrooms, and salons, a faint chemical sweetness that immediately transported you back to the 1980s. Everyone bought it because everyone needed it. It was not just a product, it was a cultural expectation. If you did not mousse your hair, it almost felt like you were missing out on the defining fashion trend of the time. Even now, when people joke about big 1980s hair, mousse is at the center of the memory. It was cheap, effective, and everywhere, shaping not only styles but also the entire aesthetic of the decade itself. Pop Rocks candy was one of the most thrilling purchases of the 1980s, partly because it came with a built-in sense of danger. The little crystals popped and fizzed in your mouth, crackling against your tongue in a way that felt both fun and a little mysterious. Kids whispered urban legends about mixing Pop Rocks with soda, claiming it could make your stomach explode, which of course only made everyone want to try it more. The candy was like a science experiment disguised as a snack, a mix of fun, curiosity, and just enough fear to make it exciting. Parents bought Pop Rocks as treats, often amused by how something so small could make kids laugh so hard. Playground dares revolved around pouring entire packets in your mouth at once, just to see how long you could stand the popping. The flavors were bold: grape, cherry, watermelon, and the sound effects turned every bite into an event. It was not just eating candy, it was putting on a show for your friends, leaning into the over-the-top fun of being a kid in the 1980s. For many, the crinkling sound of the wrapper alone brings back waves of nostalgia, instantly recalling those moments of laughter and wide-eyed wonder. Pop Rocks may have been controversial, but that was part of its appeal. It was a candy that crackled with energy and perfectly captured the playful, experimental spirit of the decade. E.T. lunchboxes were everywhere in the early 1980s, proving just how powerful a movie tie-in could be. When Steven Spielberg's E.T. the Extraterrestrial captured hearts in 1982, the merchandise followed almost instantly, and one of the most popular items was the lunchbox. Lunch suddenly felt like part of a movie, with each box turning an ordinary sandwich into something cinematic. Collectors even began treating them like works of art, keeping them in pristine condition. Having an E.T. lunchbox meant being part of the cultural wave, one that tied playground life directly to Hollywood magic. They were traded, shown off, and admired in cafeterias, making lunchtime a small stage for fandom. For many, that lunchbox was not just a container, it was a status symbol, a conversation starter, and a daily reminder of one of the most beloved movies of the decade. The E.T. lunchbox was as much a part of the 1980s school experience as spelling tests and recess. Perfumed stationery sets were a delightful little trend of the 1980s, filling school desks and bedroom drawers with scented paper and envelopes. Kids would write letters to friends, pen pals, and even family members using these sweet-smelling pages, turning an ordinary note into something special. Sets came in pastel colors, often decorated with hearts, rainbows, or cartoon characters, and were sold everywhere from mall shops to corner stores. Parents often gave these sets as gifts, knowing they were both inexpensive and sure to please. In a world before text messages and emails, handwritten letters carried real weight, and perfumed stationery elevated the experience. Friends kept these letters tucked into shoeboxes, holding on to them as treasures that smelled faintly of strawberries or violets long after the ink had faded. Perfumed stationery sets were more than just school supplies. They were tokens of friendship, love, and the simple joy of sending and receiving letters in the 1980s. Hershey's chocolate syrup in a can was a staple of the 1980s kitchen, instantly recognizable by its heavy metal container and bold red and brown design. Before the convenience of plastic squeeze bottles, this was how families added chocolate flavor to milk, ice cream, or desserts. It was messy, sticky, and sometimes frustrating, but that was part of the ritual. Kids learned patience while waiting for the slow drizzle to coat their bowl of vanilla ice cream, and parents tolerated the sticky counters because it brought so much joy. Every pantry seemed to have at least one of these cans tucked away, ready to be pulled out during summer afternoons or family gatherings. Hershey's in a can was more than just syrup. It was a shared family memory, the kind of detail that instantly transports you back to kitchen tables with tall glasses of chocolate milk. For those who grew up with it, the can was messy magic, an unforgettable part of 1980s dessert culture. Sony Betamax or VHS tapes were the building blocks of home entertainment in the 1980s. Families debated which format was better, but no matter which side you were on, everyone had stacks of blank tapes in their homes. These tapes let you record television shows, preserve family events, or build personal movie collections. The simple act of labeling a tape with a marker felt important, like you were curating your own little library. Parents recorded soap operas or sports games, kids taped Saturday morning cartoons, and teenagers built collections of music videos from MTV. The choice between Betamax and VHS often came down to availability, but in the end, VHS won the market, making it the defining format of the era. Still, no household was complete without the ritual of rewinding a tape, fast-forwarding past commercials, or blowing dust out of the slot when something went wrong. Renting movies became a weekend tradition, with families gathering around the television for the latest blockbuster. Tapes were rewound, loaned to neighbors, and sometimes worn out from too many viewings. There was a sense of ownership in having your favorite shows saved on a shelf, something that streaming could never quite replicate. Sony Betamax and VHS tapes were not just technology, they were part of daily life, shaping how people watched, recorded, and remembered the 1980s. For an entire generation, the whir of a tape rewinding is as nostalgic as the movies themselves. Kool-Aid. Cool Bursts were a playground favorite, instantly recognizable by their bright plastic bottles with twist-off tops. Kids loved the act of breaking the cap, hearing the snap as it came loose, and then slurping down the sweet, colorful drink. It was candy in liquid form, sugary and bold, the kind of thing parents allowed as a cheap indulgence. The bottles were shaped with ridges that made them easy to grip, and the colors were as much a part of the fun as the flavors themselves. Every lunchbox seemed to have one stuffed inside, sitting next to a sandwich and chips, ready to be cracked open at recess. Cool Bursts made hot summer days bearable, especially during games of tag or bike rides around the neighborhood. Parents bought them in packs, often on sale, because they were inexpensive and guaranteed to make kids happy. Friends traded flavors, arguing over which was the best, grape, cherry, or tropical punch, and sometimes dared each other to chug them in one go. The drinks were sticky, messy, and often ended with stained shirts, but that was part of the charm. Cool Bursts were fun, easy, and designed for kids, making them one of the defining after-school snacks of the decade. Even today, the sight of those twisty plastic bottles brings back a flood of memories about simpler times, when the only thing that mattered was getting the first sip before your friend did. Frankie Says Relax t-shirts were a simple fad that spread like wildfire in the 1980s. Inspired by the British band Frankie Goes to Hollywood and their hit single, Relax, these shirts became a bold, wearable slogan that teenagers and even adults could not resist. The design was straightforward, big block letters across a plain white or black shirt, but that simplicity was part of its power. Wearing one instantly made you feel part of a trend, plugged into the music and fashion scene of the moment. Parents rolled their eyes. Teachers sometimes banned them, but that only made kids want them more. The shirts popped up at concerts, on the street, and even in malls, turning casual fashion into a statement of rebellion. Everyone bought them because they were cheap, recognizable, and felt like a badge of coolness. Even those who had never heard of the band knew the slogan, and the t-shirt's popularity extended far beyond the song itself. It was proof of how quickly pop culture could shape consumer choices, turning a lyric into a product and then into a national craze. For many who grew up in the 1980s, just seeing the bold text today is enough to summon memories of neon colors, loud music, and teenage freedom. Frankie says relax was not just a shirt. It was an identity marker in cotton form. Maxell audio tapes were the quiet heroes of the 1980s, tucked into bedrooms, backpacks, and glove compartments everywhere. Blank cassette tapes made it possible to record songs off the radio, capture live concerts, or create the ultimate mixtape for a crush. The commercials were unforgettable too, especially the iconic ad of a man blown back in his chair by the sheer power of sound. The tapes themselves became symbols of creativity and self-expression, letting ordinary people curate soundtracks for their own lives. Everyone had a stash of them, usually labeled with handwriting that blurred over time. You could spend hours waiting by the radio, finger on the record button, trying to catch your favorite song without the DJ talking over it. Friends traded mixtapes like secret messages, each one packed with meaning and emotion. Parents used them to record family gatherings, birthday parties, and holiday music. The act of flipping a tape halfway through, rewinding with a pencil, or hearing the magnetic hiss was all part of the experience. For many, Maxell tapes were not just a format. They were a ritual, tied to patience, personality, and persistence. They were the building blocks of personal music collections, long before digital playlists existed. In the 1980s, owning a pile of blank Maxell tapes meant you were ready to record life as it happened. Smurf figurines may have been small, but they carried huge cultural weight in the 1980s. These little blue characters were everywhere. Toy stores, cereal boxes, and fast food promotions handed them out by the millions. Each Smurf had a unique personality, from Brainy to Smurfette, which made them fun to collect and trade. They were inexpensive, colorful, and instantly recognizable, perfect for kids who wanted to build their own Smurf villages on bedroom floors. Parents bought them without hesitation, knowing they were cheap and kept kids entertained. Collections grew quickly, filling shoeboxes, shelves, and display cases. The figurines were often rewards for finishing your meal at restaurants or treats slipped into birthday goodie bags. Playground conversations revolved around who had which Smurf, and the excitement of spotting a new one was always high. Their popularity was tied not just to the toys but also to the animated television show, which glued kids to the screen on Saturday mornings. Smurfs captured the whimsical side of 1980s childhood, a mix of fantasy, fun, and endless merchandising. They were proof that even the tiniest toy could spark enormous joy, creating communities of collectors both young and old. For anyone who grew up in the decade, just holding one of those little blue figures can bring back the sound of laughter, cereal crunching, and Saturday cartoons. Tab Diet Soda was a grocery store staple that carried an unmistakable sense of the 1980s. Packaged in its iconic pink can, Tab promised a low-calorie alternative to traditional colas and built a devoted following of dieters, health-conscious adults, and curious teenagers. It was Coca-Cola's first real step into the diet market, and for years it reigned as the top choice. The taste was sharp and slightly different, but people grew attached to it, sipping it at work, at home, and on the go. The can's sleek design made it stand out, instantly recognizable on store shelves. Tab was advertised with glamour and sophistication, often tied to the fitness craze of the decade. It became a symbol of the new lifestyle trends, mixing indulgence with restraint. Families stocked it in refrigerators, and vending machines always seemed to have it available. For some, Tab was not just a drink but a habit, one that defined their daily routines. Although Diet Coke eventually replaced it as the more popular choice, the legacy of Tab remains strong for anyone who grew up in the 1980s. Its pink can was more than soda. It was an icon of changing times, when even something as simple as cola reflected bigger shifts in culture. Stirrup pants were the clothing item no one escaped in the 1980s. These leggings had elastic straps that looped under the feet, keeping them snug and smooth no matter what shoes you wore. They were comfortable, practical, and stylish enough to fit into both casual and dressy wardrobes. Every school hallway, dance studio, and shopping mall seemed to be filled with kids and teens sporting stirrup pants in bright colors and bold patterns. Parents appreciated how easy they were to wash and wear, while kids loved how they paired with oversized sweaters and slouchy socks. The look became tied to aerobics culture, with fitness videos and gyms showing women stretching and dancing in stirrup pants and neon tops. They made fashion feel effortless. No bunching, no riding up, just sleek lines and endless versatility. Everyone had at least one pair, often in multiple colors, and they became a kind of uniform for the decade. Photos from school events, vacations, and family outings almost always show someone wearing them. Even if fashion later poked fun at them, stirrup pants remain one of the purest symbols of 1980s style. They blended comfort with trendiness, turning simple leggings into a cultural phenomenon. Hot Wheels collector cases were prized possessions for kids in the 1980s. These hard plastic cases, often shaped like tires or decorated with racing stripes, allowed kids to neatly store and show off dozens of die-cast cars. Each slot fit a car perfectly, making it easy to keep track of favorites and organize growing collections. Parents liked them because they kept toys from cluttering the floor, while kids loved them because they turned simple cars into something worth protecting. Hot Wheels were small enough that new ones were affordable, so collections grew quickly. The cases often came with special designs or limited edition branding, making them collectibles in their own right. They were more than just storage. They were a symbol of being serious about your hobby, a way to show off and carry your passion. For kids in the 1980s, the collector case was as essential as the cars themselves. Soap on a rope was a quirky gift item that became surprisingly popular in the 1980s. Found in department stores, novelty shops, and holiday catalogs, these soaps came molded into fun shapes and attached to a sturdy rope. But in practice, it became a conversation piece, a gag gift that still managed to get used. Families bought them as stocking stuffers, co-workers exchanged them in office gift swaps, and kids giggled at the silly shapes. Popular versions came shaped like footballs, cars, or even cartoon characters, making them feel more playful than ordinary soap. The rope kept the soap from disappearing into the tub, and the oversized bars lasted a long time. Soap on a rope fit perfectly into the 1980s spirit of mixing fun with practicality. It was affordable, useful, and whimsical, the kind of thing you might not buy for yourself, but were always happy to receive. Michael Jackson's Thriller album was more than music. It was a global event, and in the 1980s, it seemed like every household had a copy. Whether on vinyl, cassette, or the new compact disc, Thriller sold in record numbers and dominated charts. The music video for Thriller itself became a cultural phenomenon, blending music and film into something no one had ever seen before. Families bought the album because it appealed to everyone. Kids danced to it, teenagers memorized the moves, and parents respected its artistry. The iconic cover image of Michael in his white suit became just as recognizable as the music itself. Owning Thriller was not just about enjoying the songs. It was about being part of history, part of a global conversation. The album united people across backgrounds, making it one of the most universal purchases of the decade. Thriller was not just bought, it was lived. Little Debbie snack cakes were a constant presence in 1980s lunchboxes, grocery carts, and after-school kitchens. Oatmeal pies, Swiss rolls, nutty bars, and zebra cakes all became childhood staples, individually wrapped and ready to grab. For children, unwrapping a Little Debbie snack felt like opening a tiny present, with each cake offering sweetness and comfort in equal measure. Birthday parties and sleepovers often featured boxes of these cakes, stacked like treasures on the snack table. The variety was part of the charm. There was always a new flavor to try or a favorite to return to. For many families, they were a reward, a bribe, or just a way to brighten an ordinary afternoon. The taste of those cakes, sweet and slightly artificial, is unforgettable to anyone who grew up in the 1980s. Little Debbie became a symbol of childhood itself. Disposable film cameras were a travel essential in the 1980s, especially for families heading on vacations. These simple cameras came preloaded with film and could be tossed away after development, making photography easier and less intimidating. Kids were often handed these cameras to snap their own pictures, resulting in blurry but cherished shots of theme parks, beaches, and birthday parties. Drugstores and photo labs developed the film, often surprising families with unexpected gems hidden among the rolls. Disposable cameras also became popular at weddings, reunions, and school trips, where they were passed around so everyone could contribute. The photos they produced were imperfect but real, capturing the messy, unpolished truth of everyday life. For many, flipping through those glossy prints is like opening a time capsule of the 1980s, filled with crooked smiles and sun-faded colors. Disposable film cameras were not just a convenience, they were memory makers, tools that let anyone become the family photographer for a day. Pepsi Free was one of those products that seemed to belong entirely to the 1980s. It was Pepsi's big swing at offering a caffeine-free cola, arriving in bright red cans that stood out on grocery shelves. Parents who wanted to cut back on caffeine for themselves or for their kids reached for Pepsi Free without hesitation. The drink was smooth, sweet, and familiar enough that it blended right into family dinners, birthday parties, and after-school hangouts. It became even more famous after a small but hilarious scene in Back to the Future, where Marty McFly ordered a Pepsi Free and confused the 1950s diner owner. That single line cemented the soda in pop culture, making it unforgettable even for people who never drank it. For many households, Pepsi Free was a regular purchase, stacked in refrigerators alongside Tab, Diet Coke, and traditional Pepsi. It captured the era's growing concern about health and lifestyle without losing the fun and flashiness that defined soft drink marketing. Even though it eventually disappeared, its red can remains one of those instantly recognizable symbols of the decade, forever tied to both family kitchens and Hollywood nostalgia. Stickers from vending machines were a tiny thrill that felt like treasure to kids in the 1980s. For a quarter, you could slide a coin into the slot at the entrance of a grocery store or arcade, crank the handle, and pull out a cardboard sleeve hiding a glossy sticker inside. The designs ranged from glittery hearts and neon rainbows to muscle cars, cartoon characters, and outrageous slogans. The surprise was half the fun. You never knew exactly what you were going to get, which made every sticker feel like a prize. Kids collected them, traded them, and proudly stuck them to lockers, notebooks, and bedroom mirrors. Parents tolerated the habit because it was cheap entertainment, just a few coins to keep a child happy during errands. The vending machines themselves became landmarks, with kids dragging their parents to the same spot week after week to see what new stickers might appear. Sometimes the stickers even became social currency, traded like baseball cards on school playgrounds. For a generation of kids, these little vending machine treasures symbolized freedom, independence, and the thrill of choice, all for just 25 cents. VHS rewinder machines might sound funny today, but in the 1980s they were a common household gadget. Video cassette recorders were expensive, and constant rewinding put a strain on the motors inside. That is where standalone rewinders came in. Small, boxy devices that could rewind a tape faster and safer than your VCR. Families bought them to protect their investments, ensuring that their beloved machines would last longer. They came in simple designs, often shaped like cars or sleek little boxes, adding a bit of fun to an otherwise mundane task. Kids actually enjoyed watching the tape zip back to the beginning, the spools whirling like tiny wheels. Renting movies from the video store made rewinders even more important, since tapes had to be rewound before being returned. Be Kind, Rewind was not just a slogan, it was a rule, and a rewinder made it easy to follow. The gadget became one of those quiet staples of home entertainment, sitting right next to the television or on a side table. Owning one was proof that your family took movie nights seriously, investing not only in tapes, but also in the tools to keep them in good shape. Slap bracelets were one of the biggest playground crazes of the late 1980s. These colorful bands looked like simple strips of plastic until you smacked them against your wrist. Then they snapped into place with a satisfying click. Inside was a thin steel strip wrapped in fabric or vinyl decorated with neon colors, patterns, and cartoon prints. Every kid wanted one, and once you had one, you wanted 5 more to stack up your arms. The bracelets became part toy, part fashion accessory, worn at school, on the playground, and even at the dinner table. They were traded like currency, swapped for stickers, candy, or favors between friends. Teachers tried banning them after the noise and distraction became too much, but that only fueled the craze. Parents bought them in bulk at toy stores, often as party favors or stocking stuffers. Slap bracelets were cheap, fun, and endlessly collectible, capturing the playful, over-the-top spirit of the decade. Even decades later, the sound of that snap still sparks instant nostalgia, recalling school hallways filled with laughter and wrists lined with bright, clacking bands. Caboodles makeup cases were every teenager's dream accessory in the 1980s. Hard plastic and brightly colored, they popped open to reveal trays and compartments perfect for lip gloss, scrunchies, nail polish, and brushes. They were modeled after professional makeup artist cases, but designed for everyday use, making every teen feel glamorous. Opening one felt like unlocking a treasure chest, each tray lifting to reveal another layer of personal style and secrets. Parents bought them as birthday gifts or back-to-school essentials, and they quickly became must-haves for slumber parties and trips. Girls decorated them with stickers, filled them with friendship bracelets, and carried them proudly like fashion statements. Caboodles symbolized independence, a place to keep your own things organized and private. They were both practical and stylish, reflecting the bright, bold aesthetic of the era. No bedroom floor was complete without one, and no trip to the mall was safe without the temptation of spotting a new design. For many, caboodles were more than storage. They were confidence in plastic form, a little box of color that represented growing up in the 1980s. Carnation. Instant breakfast was marketed as nutrition in a glass, but poor kids knew it mostly as a sugar rush before school. The powder was mixed into milk, promising vitamins, minerals, and energy, but mostly tasting like chocolate milk with extra grit. Parents loved it because it was fast and cheap, filling kids up in minutes. The powder never fully dissolved, leaving clumps at the bottom of the glass that kids stirred endlessly with spoons. Strawberry, vanilla, or chocolate, all of them packed with sweetness that got you out the door buzzing. Mothers bought it in bulk, convinced it was a healthy shortcut, even if it was closer to dessert than breakfast. For kids, it was better than cereal some mornings, and for parents, it was one less thing to worry about. Today, people laugh at the idea of calling it instant nutrition. But in the 1970s, Carnation Instant Breakfast was a grocery item every poor kid remembered with a mix of nostalgia and sugar-coated energy. There was no freedom quite like a bike in the 1970s. No schedule, no helmet, just you and your rusted 10-speed flying down the sidewalk like you had somewhere to be. You did not. That was the point. You pedaled to the store for gum, to your friend's house just to hang. You rode in packs, racing down hills, throwing your hands in the air like Evel Knievel. Nobody tracked your location. Your parents did not panic if you disappeared for a few hours. "Be home by dark," they said. So you kept one eye on the sun, one on the road, and hoped you made it back before the streetlights flickered on. It was pure, unsupervised childhood. Scraped knees, popped tires, cardboard in the spokes to make it sound like a motorcycle. Sometimes your bike broke down and you just walked it the rest of the way, talking about everything and nothing with whoever stuck by you. It was never about the destination. It was about how far you could go before someone called you home. You were not just riding a bike. You were becoming your own person. Every block was yours to conquer. Every shortcut became a story. In the 1970s, your bike was your first taste of independence, and maybe your last for a while. And as the sun dipped low and you coasted into the driveway, you felt bigger than you were. That kind of freedom, you never really forget it. Boxed gelatin mix, store brand, no frills, was the dessert you made when there was not enough for anything else. It cost pennies, took only water, and could sit in the fridge for days without going bad. Red, orange, lime green, it all tasted mostly the same. But that did not matter. It was cold, wiggly, sweet, and strangely satisfying. You poured it into mismatched bowls, let it set, and waited for that first satisfying spoonful. It was something you could offer guests and still feel like a good host. It filled space at birthday parties, potlucks, and school lunches. You could stretch it with canned fruit or whipped topping, turn it into a salad if you wanted to get fancy, or just eat it straight. Sometimes you made it just because you needed to feel like something was under control. It set slowly in the fridge, and for a few hours, you had something to look forward to. Gelatin mix did not impress anyone, but it held its place. Colorful, sweet, and just enough to count as dessert. If you saw one of these leaning against a kid's garage, you knew they were living a different life. The Sears 10-speed Free Spirit was not just a bicycle, it was an upgrade. Taller, sleeker, and built for long rides, this thing looked like it came with a training manual. And unlike your single-speed hand-me-down, this had gears. 10 of them. That meant you could coast up hills while everyone else was walking theirs to the top. But bikes like this did not come cheap. They were department store royalty. Rich kids got them for birthdays, milestones, or just because. The paint never chipped, the chain never squeaked, and the kid riding it always looked like they had somewhere important to be, even if they were just circling the cul-de-sac. And when they pulled up to school, they parked them like prized possessions. You did not dare lean your bike next to theirs. It just looked wrong. These bikes were made for smooth roads, summer wind, and families who had extra room in the garage. You could hear the click of the shifters from a mile away, and every click reminded you that some kids were already going places, even if it was just around the block. Store-brand American cheese singles were the cheapest cheese you could buy. Plastic-wrapped slices that melted like magic and turned any sandwich into comfort food. You used them on grilled cheese, cheeseburgers, or even scrambled eggs if you were in a mood. You used to get 20 slices for under $2. Now the same pack costs over $4 and feels thinner than ever. It tears when you peel it, it sweats when it is warm. But you still buy it because it makes the food feel like home. You stand in the aisle comparing slices, wondering if it is worth going generic again. Spoiler, even the generics are not cheap anymore. Cheese singles used to be filler food. Now they are another reason your grocery total feels like rent. These things were loud, literally and figuratively. Custom name belt buckles became a full-blown trend in the 1970s, and if your name was shining in metal across your waist, you were automatically cooler. They were chunky, shiny, and spelled out exactly who you were. And trust me, only certain kids wore them. The ones whose parents took them to the mall and said, "Pick anything you want." These buckles were not just about fashion, they were about identity. In a time before social media, this was your personal brand, worn right at the center of your body. You would walk into school and bam, there it was. Tony, Michelle, Jason, like a name tag that you had to earn. It said, "I matter." It said, "Look at me." And more than anything, it said, "I am not afraid to shine." Most of us could not afford them. Maybe you had a plain belt. Maybe you had no belt at all. But the kids with custom buckles, they made sure you saw them. They would tug their shirts up just enough, stand with hands on hips, or lean against lockers so that metal gleamed in the hallway light. It was all for show, and it worked. Store-brand peanut butter crackers were the kind of snack that showed up when lunch was still a few hours away. They came in little plastic sleeves, bright orange crackers, sandwiching a thin layer of slightly sweet, slightly salty peanut butter. You could buy a box of 6-packs for under $1, and they lasted all week if you were careful. They were crumbly, dry, and left peanut butter in the corners of your mouth. But you never said no to them. They were the treat tucked into a lunchbox when cookies were out of reach. You ate them slow, one bite at a time, trying to make them last, or you scarfed them down fast because hunger had no patience. Some broke in the package. Some were perfect, but everyone counted. They were the in-between snack that got you through school days, grocery trips, or waiting for dinner to be done. You never thought of them as luxury, but looking back, they were one of the most dependable little things in your pantry. Peanut butter crackers did not make a meal, but they gave you just enough to keep going. Store-brand peanut butter crackers were the kind of snack that showed up when lunch was still a few hours away. They came in little plastic sleeves, bright orange crackers, sandwiching a thin layer of slightly sweet, slightly salty peanut butter. You could buy a box of 6-packs for under $1, and they lasted all week if you were careful. They were crumbly, dry, and left peanut butter in the corners of your mouth. But you never said no to them. They were the treat tucked into a lunchbox when cookies were out of reach. You ate them slow, one bite at a time, trying to make them last, or you scarfed them down fast because hunger had no patience. Some broke in the package. Some were perfect, but everyone counted. They were the in-between snack that got you through school days, grocery trips, or waiting for dinner to be done. You never thought of them as luxury, but looking back, they were one of the most dependable little things in your pantry. Peanut butter crackers did not make a meal, but they gave you just enough to keep going. The regular Lincoln logs were already something special. Those smooth, notched pieces of wood that clicked together into cabins and forts, every kid loved them. But the giant Frontier set? That was a whole different league. This thing came in a massive box, filled to the brim with hundreds of logs, roofs, chimneys, and all the accessories needed to build your own village. Not just a cabin, a settlement. And rich kids had them all. They would dump the whole set onto their clean playroom floor and start building like pioneers with a trust fund. The rest of us maybe had a small tin with a dozen pieces that barely made a fence. But the giant Frontier set? You could make entire battle scenes. It had extra long logs, green roof slats, plastic figures, even little horses and wagons. These were not just toys, they were a historical reenactment in your living room. The box said, ages 4 and up, but you needed a good 15 feet of floor space just to use the whole set properly. Rich kids would invite you over, let you build one wall, then take over. It was always their fort, their rules. And even though you told yourself it was just wood, it still felt like they had more imagination just because they could build more. That is what these sets did. They made creativity feel like something you had to buy in bulk. Frozen fish sticks were once a weeknight hack. You could feed the family, serve them with fries, and still come in under budget. The box was big, the sticks were crispy-ish, and no one asked what kind of fish it actually was. You dipped it in ketchup or tartar sauce and called it done. That box that used to cost $3? It is closer to $7 now. And the sticks are smaller, thinner, more breading, less fish. Even the bargain brands have gone up. And it is not like anyone thought frozen fish sticks were top-tier cuisine. They were there for the nights when you had no energy, no plan, and no money. But now, they are part of the inflation club. You still eat them, you still sort of enjoy them, but you cannot ignore the price anymore. Even fake fish got expensive. It looked like something from a spaceship. The Polaroid SX70 was the first folding instant camera, and when you saw someone snap a photo and watch it develop in seconds, it felt like magic. Rich kids did not just take pictures, they made memories on demand. You had to pay for the camera and the film, which came in little packs that were just as expensive as the camera itself. Most families did not mess with that. Too pricey, too fragile, too much of a risk. But for the kids who had one, it was a golden ticket to popularity. At birthday parties, school trips, sleepovers, you knew who had the camera. They would pass the picture around as it faded into life. Everyone would huddle around like it was a crystal ball. And even if the photo came out blurry, it still felt special. Because you could hold it. You could pin it to a wall or tuck it into a notebook. It was proof that you were there. That moment belonged to you. Unless, of course, you were just standing on the edge of the photo, half in, half forgotten. Canned applesauce was dessert, side dish, and lunchbox filler all in one. It came in big cans, small cans, even plastic cups toward the end of the decade. It was smooth, sweet, and slightly tangy, and always better cold. You served it with pork chops, spooned it into bowls, or spread it on toast. Sometimes it was cinnamon-flavored, sometimes plain, but always familiar. It was fruit that required no peeling, no chewing, and no mess. You stirred it before serving because the water always rose to the top. It came out in a soft plop and sat in the bowl like a scoop of mashed fruit. It cooled your tongue after hot meals and added sweetness to otherwise dull plates. Sometimes it was the only thing on the plate that felt like dessert. You never got excited about it, but you always finished it. Kids loved it. Adults used it. It was dependable. Canned applesauce was one of those foods that never tried to do too much, but always gave just enough. Day-old bread from the discount bin was the last line of defense for anyone trying to stretch $1. You could get a loaf for 25 cents, sometimes 2 for $1. It was dented, misshapen, maybe a little dry, but it was bread, and it worked. Toast it, freeze it, make French toast and pretend it was intentional. Now, even the day-old rack is creeping up. $1.50, $2. For bread that has already been passed over once. Some stores have even gotten rid of it altogether. And that hits harder than it should. The bin used to be a quiet little corner of mercy. Now it feels like it is fading out. You could feed a family with the stuff nobody else wanted. It was a badge of thrift. A smart move, not a desperate one. But now the markdown shelf is starting to feel like a trick. And when old bread starts costing like new bread, you start to wonder, what is next? Bologna ends from the deli were the mystery meat of childhood in poor households. At the end of the slicer's work, when the big log of bologna was too short to fit properly, the store sold the leftover ends at a discount. Families lined up for them, taking home bags of odd-shaped chunks. They were fried in a skillet, stacked between bread, or diced into casseroles. Sometimes the slices were thick and uneven, curling up in the pan like little cups of grease. Other times they were mashed into sandwiches with mustard, a meal that felt like a feast even though it cost pennies. Kids complained, but they ate every bite because meat was meat and bologna was king in a poor kitchen. Families stretched those ends as far as they could, using every scrap in lunches and dinners. It was cheap, salty, and filling, which was all that mattered. Today, it might seem funny, but for kids in the 1970s, the taste of fried bologna ends was unforgettable. Cream of mushroom soup used to be the unsung hero of 1,000 casseroles. It was not something you ate on its own, but it was the base of every budget recipe your mom made from a church cookbook. You poured it into green beans, poured it over rice, or mixed it into tuna noodles and called it dinner. Back then, it was under $1, always. Now, closer to $2, and that is if you are lucky. Some stores price it like it is homemade French bisque. You used to toss 3 or 4 into the cart without thinking. Now you scan the shelf and hope for a 2-for-1 deal. And it is not just mushroom, cream of chicken, celery, broccoli. They are all climbing like they forgot who they were feeding. For generations, these soups were budget stretchers. They glued together ingredients that had no business being called a meal. But now they are part of the problem. Casseroles just got more expensive. Before they became a full-blown craze in the 1980s, Cabbage Patch Kids started as something far more rare and far more expensive. The early prototypes were handmade, cloth dolls called Little People, created by a young artist named Xavier Roberts, and only the richest families got them. These were not mass-produced toys from the shelf. These were boutique, soft sculpture dolls you adopted, literally. They came with birth certificates, backstories, and price tags that made your parents scoff and walk away. But if someone in your class had one, it was a big deal. You did not just own a Cabbage Patch Kid. You were its parent. You cradled it, named it, introduced it to friends. And that level of attachment, it made the rest of us feel like we were missing something. Our dolls came from supermarket aisles and yard sales. Theirs came in fancy boxes with custom signatures. These early dolls were not toys. They were art. And when the craze exploded a few years later, those rich kids got to say, "I had one before they were popular." Of course they did. They always did. Plain white rice pudding cups were the quiet dessert no one bragged about, but everyone seemed to eat. They came chilled, sealed with foil, and tasted like soft, sweetened memory. They were thick, creamy, and filled with tiny grains of rice that reminded you food did not have to be loud to be good. It was the kind of dessert that made you sit down, take a spoon, and actually pay attention. The cinnamon on top, when it was there, added just enough to make it feel like something made with care. You never asked for rice pudding, but when it was there, you always ate it. Some came from the store in those little 4-packs wrapped in cardboard. Others came from home, made from leftover rice and sweetened milk, poured into Tupperware. It was humble, but it was honest. And it reminded you that dessert did not have to be perfect, it just had to be present. It filled the space between meals with warmth. It closed the night on a soft note. Rice pudding cups did not sparkle. But in the 1970s, they delivered comfort without trying too hard. And sometimes that was exactly what we needed. If any of this reminded you of what used to sit on your shelf, or what still might, share your favorite memory in the comments, tap like if it brought you back, and subscribe so we can keep unpacking the past together. Coffee cans for storing flour or sugar were a sight you could find on any kitchen counter. Once the last spoonful of Maxwell House or Folgers was brewed, the metal can was scrubbed clean and filled with dry goods. The plastic snap-on lid kept everything fresh enough, and the can itself was nearly indestructible. Poor families stacked them on shelves, labeled with masking tape and marker to tell sugar from flour, rice, or cornmeal. No matter how many times they were washed, they always carried that lingering coffee smell, which sometimes flavored the flour if it sat too long. But nobody minded. It was thrift in action, and that mattered more than taste. Kids grew up recognizing the sound of those plastic lids popping open as part of the rhythm of cooking at home. They doubled as storage for nails, screws, crayons, or buttons, making them as much workshop and craft supplies as kitchenware. Lined up in neat rows, they became a badge of pride, practical, reused, and full of possibility. Buying new canisters was out of the question when every household already had a pile of coffee cans ready to go. These were not just toys. They were explosions with permission slips. Model rocket launch sets in the 1970s were the holy grail of cool. You got a tube, some fins, a nose cone, and most importantly, a real engine. You could build it, paint it, and watch it launch hundreds of feet into the sky. But they were not cheap, and they were not sold just anywhere. You needed adult supervision, wide open spaces, and money for replacement engines. That meant most kids never got to launch one. Rich kids, though, they had the whole setup. They would bring them to school science fairs or launch them at the park on weekends with their parents filming from the sidelines. You could hear the countdown and your heart would pound, even if it was not your rocket. It was the kind of moment you would remember for the rest of your life, just watching. The blast-off made you feel like something bigger was always just out of reach. The rest of us just stood back, hoping to feel the whoosh as it lifted off. And when that rocket cracked through the clouds and left a trail of smoke behind, it felt like freedom, like possibility, like everything you wanted but could not quite reach. Margarine in a tub was the cheaper answer to butter, and for a long time it stayed in its lane. It spread easily, kept forever in the fridge, and came in tubs big enough to last all month. You could bake with it, fry eggs in it, melt it over vegetables, or slather it onto toast. Some people swore by it. Others just could not afford anything else. Either way, it got the job done. For years, you could get a whole tub for under $1. Now that same tub is pushing $3, and if you go for a buttery spread or something with olive oil, forget it. You are still getting oil and flavoring, but paying like it is whipped gold. The ingredients have not changed, but the price sure has. The basic brands that once saved you money are now neck and neck with store-brand butter, and that makes it harder to justify. For a while, margarine felt like a recession-proof staple, something you could count on in lean times. But today, it feels like you are being charged more for settling. It still lives in fridges across America, but now it comes with a side of frustration. When even margarine feels expensive, you start to wonder what cheap even means anymore. This one was straight up ridiculous, in the best way possible. A miniature pool table, complete with Nerf cue sticks, soft balls, and felt surface. It was like a toy, a game, and furniture all rolled into one. But you needed space. A lot of it. You could not just throw this on the floor and start playing. It took over the basement or a rec room, which meant the kid who had one also had a basement or a rec room. These sets were not cheap either. They came in big boxes and assembling them took time. But when they were set up, they were the crown jewel of the playroom. They were not built for bedrooms or cramped living rooms. They were built for homes with finished basements and quiet carpeted spaces where parents let you leave stuff out. You knew a kid had money when they had rooms dedicated to fun. You could hear the balls clack gently as rich kids lined up their shots like little pros. They wore smug grins while you tried to figure out how to hold the Nerf stick without snapping it. And the worst part? They were not even that into it. They would play a few rounds, get bored, and move on. Meanwhile, you were over there dreaming of owning one for real. Because in a world where everything felt temporary, a pool table, even a Nerf one, felt like luxury you could keep. Glass peanut butter jars reused as cups were another trademark of poor family kitchens. Brands like Skippy and Jif often sold their spreads in heavy glass containers that doubled as drinking glasses once emptied. Mothers washed them out carefully, peeled off the labels, and suddenly you had a set of sturdy cups. Kool-Aid, sweet tea, or plain tap water tasted just as good out of a peanut butter jar as it did out of any fancy glassware. Some jars even came with printed designs, cartoon characters, or logos that made them more fun than anything store-bought. Kids claimed their favorites, and God help you if a sibling drank out of your peanut butter glass. They rattled in dish racks, thick enough to survive endless drops, and often outlived real glasses that broke in a year. Families never wasted money on drinkware when they were essentially handed out for free at the grocery store. They were heavy, practical, and often mismatched, but that was part of their charm. Guests drank from them without complaint because everyone had them, and everyone understood. In poor households of the 1970s, those jars were proof that nothing useful ever went to waste. Instant mashed potatoes used to be the cheapest way to fake real comfort. Just add water, maybe some butter, and suddenly you had a side dish that looked like dinner came together on purpose. They were shelf-stable, family-sized, and cheap. $1 or less for a box that lasted weeks. Now those same boxes are $2 or $3, and the portion sizes have somehow shrunk while the price tags grew. Even store brands have edged up into "wait, what?" territory. And that is not even counting the loaded kinds with cheese or bacon flavoring. They are practically deluxe now. For people who used to grab 3 boxes without blinking, that is a shift. It means thinking twice about something you once relied on, something that filled your plate when there was not much else to serve. Sure, they are still fast, still easy, still kind of taste like cardboard fluff, but the good kind. But now they are a backup plan with a budget. Even fake potatoes are not cheap anymore. Evaporated milk used to be a poor man's secret weapon. It sat right there next to the condensed stuff, in a small metal can with a price tag you barely noticed. You kept a few in the cupboard for emergencies, or baking, or when there was no fresh milk in the fridge and the store was too far or too expensive. Back then, a can cost less than a candy bar. Today, you might be better off just buying real milk. It was used in coffee, poured over cereal, and stirred into mashed potatoes, and somehow it worked. You could stretch it with water or use it full strength when you needed extra creaminess. It was cheap comfort, quiet, overlooked, and always there when the fridge let you down. Now it sits on the shelf with a price tag that makes you double-check if you grabbed the wrong brand. That once cost less than 50 cents is flirting with $2 in some stores. It is not flashy, it is not trendy. But for people who grew up on it, evaporated milk still holds a place in the pantry and in the budget, even if it pinches now. It was not just a toy, it was a whole world, scaled down to fit on the carpet. The Fisher-Price Play family house came with a folding design that clicked open like a suitcase full of stories. You had the little plastic people, the tiny blue car, the staircase that doubled as a carrying handle, and of course, the garage. That little garage door rolled up and down with a satisfying snap, like you were living in miniature suburbia. And that is exactly what it was. The dream of a cozy home, shrunk down for small hands and big imaginations. But make no mistake, this set was premium. It was more than just the house. There were versions that came with extra cars, furniture, pets, even a plastic fence to circle the yard. And each one cost a little more. Rich kids had the full lineup. Their playroom was like a neighborhood. You would visit and see a fire station, a schoolhouse, and the house with the garage, all perfectly arranged. You wanted to dive in, but it always felt like you were borrowing someone else's world. The Play Family house was about more than pretend. It was about stability, warmth, and a sense that everything had its place. The beds were always made. The fridge was always full. There were no broken windows or peeling paint. You did not just play house. You imagined what it felt like to live in one that never ran out of light. So, which of these 1980s treasures do you remember bringing home? Drop your favorite in the comments. Give this video a like if it sparked a memory, and hit subscribe so we can keep unboxing the past together.